Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable. CNBC TV18 and CyberArk present Safeguarding Digital Identities.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Safeguarding Digital Identities, an exclusive presentation by CNBC TV18 and CyberArk. I'm your host Gautam Srinivasan, and well, to set the context, today India's digital prowess takes center stage, from BFSI's stellar 93% consumer engagement to digital payments soaring beyond 12.98 lakh crore rupees in January 2023. Now, astute leadership, accelerated post-COVID IT investments and the infusion of AI brings us to the forefront of unprecedented digital conversations. So today we delve into the critical role of digital identity in countering unauthorized access, navigating the delicate balance between security and seamless customer experiences, and of course fostering a culture of cyber security awareness. Now, joining me to discuss this further are Rajmohan Shrinivasan, CIO at Sony Pictures Networks India; Debashis Singh, who is the Chief Information Officer at Persistent Systems; and last but not the least, Rohan Vaidya, Regional Director at CyberArk. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. So let's kick things off in this segment by looking at the role of identity protection in a way, and of course maintaining that security CX balance, and of course then we look at addressing broader challenges. So Rohan, we'll start with you. As we spoke, digital transformation brings about a lot of possibilities, but in that context I want you to talk more about the role that the role of digital identity and its protection, why it is so important in today's times.
Things changed as the post-COVID world. People started using more of digital world, and in India specifically, we've had a huge outbreak of digital transactions, and everything that we're doing is now digital. If I go just a few years back before the COVID really came in, the situation was that the work of place was the work of trust. So you go to a bank, you would want to sign up with a bank which had a larger building, a bigger building, a stronger building. So there was a trust which you could visually see. Now that we are digital, your trust is more on the platform. How robust the platform is, how good the platform is, how user-friendly the platform is, you would want to engage. But then how does the bank know, and you know, or any of those guys know, whether it's Rohan coming in or somebody else coming in and going out? So that's where the digital identity starts playing a role. And with Aadhaar coming in and all possible digital identities that we use day in, day out, that's our currency to work with in everyday life. All this while, we only talked about human identities. There are machine identities. So machines talking to machines, people talking to machines, all that thing is now becoming a part of our daily life. And any human normally has about 45 digital identities now if he is an active user, a consumer, or an employee.
Absolutely, and it's now more important than ever, especially when we look at ourselves as citizens in, requesting access to services, or whether we are consumers accessing services from different brands. The role that digital identity has to play in making sure that that transaction is secure is what's going to take us forward in terms of changing our habits, in terms of accessing these services, and also making sure that we are accessing verified providers and actually accessing the service that we need to. All right, let me bring in the use cases here, and Raj, I'll come to you first, because when I look at the media and entertainment industry, the big risk is, of course, the unauthorized access. So in terms of mitigating that risk, what's your thought on?
So I think, for us, the mitigation starts at every level, right? One is at, as we call, the guard at your entry level and guard at the exit points. Obviously, we try to make sure that these are secured exit points on how these content are traversing till it reaches the end consumer. So much care could be taken at every spot. No matter what we do, as you also know that we are also into the direct to consumer, right? So there's an equal amount of mitigation which is also expected once it is out in public as well, right? So on the social media and things like that. Yes, we do take measures in guardrailing our inside out premises. But when it gets to the outside in, we do recommend some measures to make sure that you also safeguard your interest.
Secure your entry and exits and make
Absolutely.
sure it's always guarded at all points. All right. And when you speak of covering all bases, let me bring in Debashis in, because the channels of engagement, whether it's within the enterprise or it's between the enterprise and its customers, they have opened so much, because now you want your customers where they are. You want to be where your customers are, and you also want to give your employees the freedom wherever they want to work from. So I want to get your perspective of aligning digital identity and protection with broader digital transformation initiatives at Persistent Systems, and how do you go about securing business operations, especially as they get more and more complicated?
The earlier way of looking at identity probably doesn't help anymore. So it has become paramount important for every enterprise to ensure identity is protected at every level. When I say every level, it is not only the individual identity, it is machine identity. It is the combination of those two identities bringing together and ensuring that the threat actors are not going behind those privileged identities to kind of put you at a higher risk at such a time. And that is the way to look forward for every enterprise. And the way we are driving it today, looking at holistically, not only in silos of identity only, looking at end-to-end how we can secure our entire environment, not only for our employees, but for our customers, our investor, and give that assurance that we are doing it right every time.
All right. Let me bring in this aspect of a balance between security and customer experience. And Raj, let me bring you in. When we look at the possibilities that digital transformation brings to the table, we are also looking at a great and seamless interaction between the company and the customers that it caters to. But while the company wants to do more, the balance between security and CX also comes into play. So how does SPN achieve that balance?
It isn't an easy task, right? Let me just put it upfront, right? It isn't easy. Like the minute you say that you want to have an excellent customer experience where you do not want to have too many things being asked upfront, so obviously, there is something else at compromise. Having said, keeping the customer centricity at heart, right? Now, more and more with these cyber threats and cyber attacks which are in there, I think the consumer is also becoming more digital aware, right? Now we have adopted a kind of an approach which embraces them, get them through, right? You tell them that, in a way, why we are asking what we are saying, right? Get their consent. With their consent, tell them that what is it that you're asking for identity and how, and some of these other things that you're asking are going to be useful for protecting their own identity. This is during the time of onboarding them or empaneling them. No matter what we do, right, it's always a cat and mouse, right? Incidents do happen. Now, that's a stage. It's equally important to have what's your incident management process? How are you keeping the consumer immediately informed? It's more than the actual threat, right, of a leakage or a protection. It's the lack of the principle, not communicating it back to the consumer so that his or her own self-defense mechanism starts coming in.
Key.
That's the key.
Be transparent so that everyone can then look at mitigating that problem.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about cat and mouse game, the issue is that defenders have to win every day. Attackers have to just win once, right? That's the issue here. Maybe, Rohan, you can add a few points to what Raj has said.
So I think Raj has talked more from a culture perspective, from the other business perspective. I'll take a little bit of a technology view from it. And when you say that you got to balance risk with user experience, I think technology plays a fairly good role. And at CyberArk, we started looking at identities in a much wider way. If I am going to use the same yardstick to make people in the organization protect identities or use their identities or their credentials in the same way, it's just going to make very things difficult. The other aspects that we kind of talk about it is least privilege. A very simple theory where you're saying use and have privileges that is only required for your job. You require more, ask for more. When the job is done, take it back. And just-in-time access is an important part of the new identity security framework
That's
that
the
is
new model
required.
that we're looking at, just-in-time access, so that the context of the work that you do in that time period, that is taken care of, and it's not, you're not left the door open for threat actors to enter in. We'll talk more about that, but before you continue, I want to get in Debashis quickly to talk about adapting to all these challenges, because there's been a surge of digital tools, there's been a surge of transactions. How does persistent systems deal with these challenges?
So I will say it in this way, security is a cultural shift. It has to be driven in a different angle, and the example I will give you is, let's say airport security. When you get into, there are multi-layers of security that you have, and possibly we are absolutely fine with that, because we have got into that culture. And that exactly kind of resonate with any organization, how you kind of ensure that security becomes part of our life. The way we see it at Persistent, we believe on a zero trust architecture, which is essentially that every individual has to be authenticated for the persona and for the region that he or she trying to access some services or resources or content. And that happens at every single moment. While the employee experience or the customer experience is a key, that essentially means we have to ensure technology is working seamlessly, but at the same time it has to work. And if there is any anomaly, anything which is not following the process, there has to be a very, very defined model to detect it immediately, and a response has to immediately get initiated.
You can't treat it immediately, at least let there be a process to know how to handle that condition.
Exactly.
All right. Before we sign off for this segment, Rohan, a quick word on you on how CyberArk especially contributes to mitigating these challenges. If you can give us a brief overview.
So I would say CyberArk looks at identity security as a larger platform. Every employee who is going to be there, or every consumer who is going to be there and on the digital, needs to be having an identity, and those identities have to be secured. With the adoption of cloud by most of the companies, a normal user or standard user, I would say, becomes a privileged user. And what I mean by privilege, a privileged user is something which the bad actors are always after, because once I get your privileges on your, maybe it's your machine, maybe it's your laptop, maybe it's your iPhone, I am able to do whatever I need to do, and then it's game over. So making sure that these identities are well segregated, roles and responsibilities are well looked at, and the right products from CyberArk are applied to it, from a privilege access as well as from an identity access, whether it is a multi authentication, or it's a single sign-on, or it's a lifecycle management. I think that is something which helps the larger organizations to really look at the identity security in a much wider focus.
A more robust way. All right. So far we have covered the aspect of the role of digital identity. We've also spoken about the security and CX combination and how organizations can be agile in addressing challenges. But we need to slip into a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk more about this.
CNBC TV18 and CyberArk present Safeguarding Digital Identities. CNBC TV18 and CyberArk present Safeguarding Digital Identities.
Welcome back to Safeguarding Digital Identities, an exclusive presentation by CNBC TV18 and CyberArk. Well, in the previous segment, we covered aspects of, the role of digital identity, the security CX combinations, and of course, addressing broader challenges. Now, in this segment, we will be talking about fostering the culture of security in organizations and of course, the way ahead. So let me bring you in, Raj, to talk about this cultural aspects, because while technology can take you till a certain point, the aspect of the culture in the organization, all the stakeholders in that organization working together and of course subscribing to a certain process, that's easier said than done. So what would you say to that?
I think it's bullseye, it more than the tech, which is always constantly evolving, right? Unless and until I prepare my mindset of the people, not just my employees, but my ecosystem of partners, and finally to the end consumer, who's also my extended family, right? If I don't look at it holistically, it's going to be a challenge, right? So the culture, obviously, it starts from the leadership commitment. The first thing what we also look at is that don't go back to your old, just the IT policies, always refer to that. That's a document, right? But it has to now walk the talk. So we have come up with a lot more like gamification, trying to tell them, like for instance, we recently come up with a kind of a deep fake thing itself, trying to say with for instance, let's say I as a CIO, right, I just say, you know what, why don't you conclude on this, right? I'll come back once I land in Bangalore, I'll come back and tell you how to go about, right? This is something that I leave as a audit trail, and if this can be used and circle back to my either peers or somebody else saying that, hey, this is what Raj has said, Raj is not able to access these on the flight, can you please do this, right? So
trust but verify, that's the age-old idiom which
yes, right? So we just play this saying that, look, this is something can be done, right? So awareness, trying to tell them that you're constantly exposed if you're not clear. So this is kind of one approach that we are taking. Then the second approach that we are taking is that we are re-looking at every of these policies, right? There are multiple policies. One says the InfoSec, the other says, your corporate IT policy. So you're just saying how to make it current. How do we make it more and more relevant? How can I make it more tangible, approachable, and accessible by everybody?
That's an important point, because people then see the context of what you're doing. It's not a policy in isolation. It is actually a message to all the employees that if you do this in a certain way, it's easier for you and it's easier for the company. All right, as we head to the last leg of the conversation, let's also look at concrete recommendations to our viewers as to what they can do to secure digital identity. So Rohan, let me bring you in as a cybersecurity expert. We have a large audience of CIOs and CXOs. What would you recommend for these companies which are looking to enhance measures to secure digital identities of their employees? What would you say?
Right. So I think the first thing starts off with think like an attacker. The mindset, if you have thinking what an attacker could think of, I think a lot of the action can be mitigated in terms of what happens. The second part which I always talk about is a lot of the conversations happen about processes, people, technology. And I think a very simple thing that we always use in our day-to-day life is common sense. And if I just have to translate that to cyber, I would say you should start having a cyber sense. Even if you have your boss sending you a text message or a phone coming in from your wife, take one step back and say, is this the time I would get this phone call? Will I get this message? Should I really act on it, not act on it? One step back, use your cyber sense, and I think that takes you a long way.
All right, use your cyber sense. When I come to you, Raj, I'll give you the visualization of Spider-Man, right? Because the tingling sense on something is wrong is what saves the day. So in your context, in terms of the securing of digital identities, what would you say to our viewers as we sign off in this conversation? The approach that they need to take so that they can be agile while at the same time they can secure their fortress, so to say.
I would definitely think baby steps, right? Start the very purpose of when you say agile itself, you start with something, take those definitive steps and then move on. While, all these standards like, even the DPDP, which has been going to come in and, adhering to those definitely helps you. Following on GDPR or those kind of compliances definitely helps you from an industry standard. And the other thing I would definitely suggest is that go granular, right? No matter what you put as your multi-factor authentication or on your, let's say, the common identities like your email IDs, your date of birth, somewhere somebody will leak it, right? Now, go beneath. What is it that being hacked or gotten into? Can I look at encryption methods? How do I actually protect those assets? Start treating your data as assets.
I think that's a very important message, considering if data is the new oil, you need to treat your data as your asset. And rather than having a surface level conversation on security and digital identity, you need a more granular conversation around that. All right, Debashis, taking you in for the last word and bringing your perspective on innovative strategies that Persistent System looks at when they want to stay ahead of this evolving threat landscape. What's the message that you have for our viewers?
So, I will possibly bring in the industry view from the IT services. This is an industry where within the organization, there are sizable number of employees who are administrators. You are administrator for internal systems, you are administrator for customer environments as well. And for business reason, there are a lot of people has got privileged access for large number of data sets. So, for dealing with that, you need to have a very, very robust framework, ensuring that the privileged access are given based on time and kind of need to know basis. That's number one. Number two, every single data asset that you have, they need to be classified. You need to have classification of content, defining where this data can be used, who can use it, and what purpose. When you join these two along with the zero trust, I'm sure you'll be able to drive a much secure organization culture for yourself, your organization, and your investors. And
all right, to sum up the points that we have discussed as we wrap up today's discussion, and the insights into India's digital evolution, they emphasize the necessity for agile measures in safeguarding identities. And as we discussed, the conversation needs to be more granular rather than surface level. But for now, I'd like to thank all of the panelists for sharing so many details and insights on this topic, and of course, making that conversation granular. And remember to pay heed to your spidey sense of security. And of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Till next time, this is your host Gautam Srinivasan signing off. Have a great day.
CNBC TV18 and CyberArk present Safeguarding Digital Identities.